All right, welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're going to be jumping into the chilling world of Dennis Nilsen, the Muswell Hill murderer.
Oh, yeah.
And for this one,
This is a good one.
we're pulling our research straight from the true crime podcast Case File, specifically parts 1 and 2 of their episode Case 144, the Muswell Hill murderer.
Yeah, that's a great episode.
Yeah, and we're going to try and unpack just how Nilsen was able to evade capture for so long and just what drove him to commit such horrific acts.
Yeah, it's a story that's as fascinating as it is disturbing. And, it really brings up some big questions about how someone like this could operate undetected for years in the heart of London.
Right from the start. I mean, just the sheer number of victims is just staggering.
Yeah.
The Case File episodes mentioned that before he even moved to Muswell Hill, he had already killed 12 people.
Yeah, that's right. And that pattern, even before his most infamous crimes, really suggests that this wasn't some sudden isolated event.
Right.
There's a history here, a buildup that's really important to understand.
Right, yeah. I mean, the sources do touch on a troubled childhood, but really when they get into it, it's all about Nilsen's time in Muswell Hill, particularly his flat at 23 Cranley Gardens.
Yeah.
And, you kind of wonder, how can somebody get away with such horrible acts for so long? Well, the squalor of his flat actually played a role.
Absolutely. The isolation, the heavy drinking, the just general state of disrepair, it all kind of created an environment where something like this could go unnoticed for far too long.
Yeah, it's almost as if the flat itself became like an accomplice to his crimes.
For sure.
And it's within those walls that the violence just escalates so dramatically.
Yeah.
The attacks on Paul Nobbs and John Howlett are prime examples of that.
Yeah. Nobbs barely survives a strangulation attempt, and tragically Howlett doesn't make it. But it's chilling how Nilsen's disposal methods evolve.
Right.
He goes from simply trying to hide the bodies to actively dismembering and even boiling body parts.
Yeah.
It's a gruesome escalation that really speaks to his growing desperation and perhaps even a twisted sense of confidence.
It's almost like he's refining his methods with each horrific act.
Yeah.
And then there's the incident with Carl Stoddard.
Right.
This one really struck me because it just seemed like he had a change of heart mid-murder.
Yeah.
He even helped Stoddard recover.
Right.
It's just such a bizarre departure from his usual pattern.
It really makes you question the nature of Nilsen's psyche.
Yeah.
Was it a genuine moment of remorse,
Right.
a fleeting flicker of humanity, or was it a calculated act, a way to further exert control over his victim? The sources leave us wondering.
Yeah, it really does. And the disturbing part is that after this brief deviation, he falls right back into his gruesome pattern.
Right back.
Graham Allen, Stephen Sinclair, more victims are added to the list.
And what's particularly disturbing about Graham Allen's case is that he, like many of Nilsen's victims, was already living on the fringes of society. His disappearance might have gone unnoticed for even longer, if not for the events that ultimately exposed Nilsen.
Right, which brings us to the block drain at 23 Cranley Gardens.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine being that plumber called in for what you think is a routine job only to stumble upon human flesh and bone? It's like something out of a horror movie.
Yeah, that block drain wasn't just the undoing of Dennis Nilsen. It was a portal into a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's this seemingly mundane plumbing issue that finally brings his horrific crimes to light.
And even when he's confronted with this discovery, Nilsen's behavior is just bizarre.
Totally.
He tries to clear the drain himself. He lies to his neighbor about what he flushed down the toilet. He even adds KFC to the mix,
What?
hoping to mask the smell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it really speaks volumes about his state of mind at that point.
Yeah.
The desperation, the delusion, the attempt to maintain control over a situation that's clearly spiraling out of his grasp.
Yeah, for sure.
And then when the police finally arrive, he confesses with this eerie calmness, just casually stating that he's killed 15 or 16 since 1978.
Oh, my gosh.
It's chilling just how matter-of-fact he is about
Yeah.
taking human lives.
That confession must have sent shockwaves through the investigation.
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly, a block drain becomes a window into the mind of a serial killer, and the scope of his crimes is far more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. It's hard to even imagine the challenge facing investigators at that time. I mean, this is 1983, long before DNA profiling was a thing.
Right.
So they're relying on fingerprints, dental records,
Yeah.
and even Nilsen's own often hazy recollections to identify these victims.
It's mind-boggling to think about that process.
Oh, yeah?
You know, it wasn't just about solving a crime, it was about restoring identities, you know, giving back names and stories to the people that Nilsen tried to erase.
Absolutely. They set up an operation room, with bulletin boards and posters dedicated to each victim.
Wow.
It really speaks to their commitment to treating this not just as a case to be solved,
Yeah.
but as a collection of individual lives to be honored.
And as they piece together this gruesome puzzle, you know, a pattern starts to emerge.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of Nilsen's victims were young men on the fringes of society,
Right.
homeless, transient, struggling with addiction.
Yeah.
People who might easily slip through the cracks.
Right.
You know, their disappearances going unnoticed.
This raises a crucial question about societal vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Particularly in the context of marginalized communities,
Mhm.
Were these victims targeted because of their perceived vulnerability?
Right.
Or was it more a matter of circumstance,
Yeah.
of being in the wrong place at the wrong time?
It's a sobering thought.
For sure.
And while the investigation unfolds, we also see how Nelson reacts to being behind bars.
Yeah.
So he's placed in Brixton Prison, designated a Category A prisoner, considered high risk,
Right.
kept in isolation, moved between cells frequently.
It's here that we start to glimpse the contradictions within Nilsen's personality.
Right.
On one hand, he's this meticulous killer who planned and executed these horrific acts.
Right.
And on the other hand, he's throwing tantrums.
Yeah.
Even flinging the contents of his toilet bucket at guards.
It just seems almost childish, doesn't it?
Yeah.
His outburst over a toilet bucket.
Yeah.
But I guess it kind of speaks to this deep-seated need for control.
For sure.
Just a refusal to fully submit to authority even when he's confined
Yeah.
within the walls of a prison.
It could be seen as a desperate attempt to exert some semblance of power in an environment where he feels utterly powerless.
Right.
It's a reminder that even in captivity, the human psyche can be a complex and unpredictable thing.
And then just months before his trial, he drops a bombshell.
Was that?
He attempts to fire his solicitor, Ronald Moss,
Oh, wow.
for the fourth time.
For the fourth time.
Yeah, their relationship seems to have been quite tumultuous, marked
Mm-hmm.
by clashes of personality and, you guessed it, Nilsen's constant need to be in charge.
This move really highlights his difficulty relinquishing control.
Yeah.
Even when it's clearly not in his best interest.
Right.
It speaks to a deep-seated distrust of authority,
Right.
a belief that he knows best, even in a legal system he clearly doesn't fully understand.
But it's not all about control and defiance. There are moments when Nilsen seems to grapple with the weight of his actions.
Okay.
He writes to the police expressing this deep and personal remorse,
Wow.
acknowledging that the enormity of these acts has left him in shock.
This expression of remorse, of course, raises complex questions,
Mm-hmm.
Can someone who has committed such horrific acts truly feel genuine regret?
Right.
Or is it a calculated attempt to elicit sympathy, to try and shape public perception ahead of his trial?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's hard to know for sure what's going on in his mind. But one thing that really struck me was his relationship with author Brian Masters.
Yeah.
Nilsen provides Masters with a wealth of information, meticulously detailing his crimes,
Wow.
offering these insights into his psyche.
Interesting.
It's almost like he's trying to create a legacy
Yeah.
to ensure that his story is told on his terms.
That's an interesting point. It speaks to the complexities of his personality.
Right.
It's not simply a case of a monster who enjoyed killing.
Right.
There's a clear desire for recognition, for understanding,
Yeah.
even if it's twisted and disturbing.
It's chilling to think that even in the face of justice, some individuals will seek to control the narrative to
That's right.
manipulate public perception.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the investigation itself.
Okay.
Remember, this is a time before DNA technology.
Right.
So how do they manage to identify these victims?
So it was a long and painstaking process.
Right.
Take the case of Stephen St. Clair. They managed to identify him through fingerprints.
Okay.
But for John Howlett, it required meticulous detective work and blood type matching.
Oh, wow.
It was a real puzzle, putting together the pieces of these shattered lives.
It sounds incredibly challenging.
It was.
Especially with someone like Nilsen, who deliberately tried to erase any trace of his victims.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about identifying the victims.
Yeah.
It was about understanding Nilsen's methods.
Yeah.
For example, the identification of Martin Duffy was made possible by the engraved chef's knives that Nilsen kept as trophies.
Oh, wow.
This detail reveals a level of premeditation, of deliberate planning,
Right.
that adds another layer to his disturbing profile.
It's grimly ironic that the very objects he used to commit these acts would ultimately contribute to his downfall.
It's a classic example of how even the most meticulous criminals can make mistakes,
Right.
leaving behind clues that ultimately lead to their capture.
So they managed to identify several victims,
Yeah.
but not all of them.
Right.
What happens to those cases? Do they just go cold?
Sadly, some cases do remain unsolved.
Right.
Even with Nilsen's cooperation, several victims remain unidentified.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of the limitations of even the most thorough investigations,
Yeah.
especially in a pre-DNA era.
It's heartbreaking to think that there are families out there who may never know
Yeah,
what happened to their loved ones.
for sure.
It adds another layer of tragedy to this already horrific story.
And it speaks to a larger issue.
Right.
The vulnerability of those on the margins of society.
Yeah.
The fact that some of these victims could vanish without a trace
Yeah.
highlights a societal blind spot
Yeah.
that
Right.
we as a society
Yeah.
really need to address.
It's a sobering reminder that we need to be more vigilant, more
Yeah.
aware of those around us,
Right.
especially those who might be more susceptible to becoming victims.
Absolutely. Every life has value. And no one deserves to disappear unnoticed.
Right. But amidst the darkness, there are also these glimmers of hope.
Oh, yeah?
The fact that two of Nilsen's victims, Paul Nobbs and Douglas Stewart, survived their encounters with him
Yeah.
is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Their stories offer a powerful counterpoint to the narrative of Nilsen's control and domination.
Right.
They remind us that even in the face of unimaginable evil,
Yeah.
the will to survive, to fight back, can prevail.
And while Nilsen's fate is sealed, the impact of his crimes
Yeah.
continues to ripple outwards.
Of course.
The families of the victims, the investigators who worked tirelessly to bring him to justice,
Right.
the community that was forever changed by his horrific acts.
Yeah.
They all carry the weight of this case.
It's a reminder that the pursuit of justice doesn't end with a conviction.
Right.
There's a long process of healing, of understanding, of coming to terms with the unimaginable.
So what can we take away
From this deep dive into the disturbing world of Dennis Nilsen?
For one, it underscores the importance of remembering the victims.
Right.
While Nilsen may have sought to erase their identities, it's crucial that their stories are not forgotten.
Right.
They were sons, brothers, friends,
Yeah.
individuals with lives and dreams
Right.
that were tragically cut short.
It's also a reminder that even in the darkest of cases,
Yeah.
there's an element of humanity,
Right.
a drive to bring some measure of peace and closure
Yeah.
to those affected.
Absolutely. The dedication of the investigators, their commitment to identifying the victims and understanding Nilsen's motives
Right.
is a testament to that.
This case also highlights the societal vulnerabilities that allowed these crimes to occur.
Right.
The fact that many of Nilsen's victims were marginalized individuals,
Yeah.
their disappearances going unnoticed for extended periods, speaks to a broader societal issue that
Yes.
demands attention. It's a call to action.
Yeah.
A reminder to be vigilant, to look out for those on the fringes,
Yeah.
to ensure that their lives are not seen as disposable.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
But this case is far from closed.
Right.
It continues to raise important questions about criminal psychology, investigative techniques,
Yeah.
and the societal factors that contribute to such tragedies.
And here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay.
Several of Nilsen's victims remain unidentified.
Right.
What does this say about the vulnerability of marginalized individuals, not just in the 1970s and 80s,
Right. Yeah.
but even today?
Yeah.
How can we create a society where every life is valued,
Right.
where no one disappears unnoticed?
These are questions worth pondering.
They are.
As we strive to create a world where such horrific crimes are not just solved,
Right.
but prevented.
Absolutely.
Well, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to explore the source material and delve deeper into the many books and documentaries that have been produced about Dennis Nilsen and his victims.
It's a dark chapter in human history,
Yeah,
but one that offers valuable insights into the human condition
right.
and the importance of seeking understanding,
Yeah.
even in the face of evil.
Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, this is a good one.
We'll see you next time.